Power station's taking a long time. Let's get going. So we got Henry VIII dying, Edward VI became king. Now I see a couple phones out. I will take them now, I guess. Sorry. Going to I don't want to see a phone. Not again, if I get a phone. And you know, my thing is, if I do have to take a phone, I will turn them in the office. But I do it when I leave. I usually say around one. Which is just what I do. All right, so we got Edward VI. He died. We have this creepy picture with the broken neck. Let's go really quick. So, what was the big deal? Henry married Catherine. What was the problem with Catherine?
He was originally married to his brother.
Yeah, married to the brother, but they found a verse in the Bible, Leviticus, said it was okay, or Deuteronomy, and then she had no sons. What did she have?
Like 2 girls, I think?
It was one girl. Do you remember her name? Mary. Then divorced her. That would lead to the start of the church, the act of supremacy. What? Who did Henry marry after Catherine was divorced? Annulled. Anne Boleyn. And who's Anne Boleyn's kid? Yeah, that's Elizabeth. Not a son. Henry might have committed a sin, and so what would happen to Anne Boleyn?
Yeah.
Yeah, they accused her of having an affair, which she probably didn't. But you know, it wouldn't have mattered anyways. But don't forget, men could do it, women could not. And then it was the next wife. And who was her son? Edward. Is the creepy picture right there. But she died very young. Who's the next one? And what happened to her?
He got repulsive, so they got a divorce.
Who? Which one? Yeah, Macleese. Well, she actually was repulsed by Henry VIII. That's probably what happened. Henry realized, I don't want to be around this person who finds me disgusting. So he said it was her. Got divorced. Who's next? Who's the next one after Anne Macleese? And what happened to her? And then the last one. And that one, she would be almost like Henry's mother. Well, so we have Edward. And there's poor Edward. And he, Protestant, controlled, sickly. We got the Book of Common Prayers. Oh, we got Lady Jane Grey, right? And Lady Jane, poor Lady Jane Grey.
That's what he said that was like dragged out. He didn't know what was going to be.
She had no idea what was going on. She was 16 years old and had no idea why she was told to be queen. She was like, okay, all these men were telling her what to do. And then the next thing you know, those men were overthrown. Some of them were arrested, but none of them would be executed. She would be executed. She's the one literally who said, why? Why am I being killed? I don't know what's going on. And then mouse. That's where we get married. Catherine's daughter, Mary the First. And she would be queen for 3 years. Mary the First. Now here's the thing. When we're talking about England, Henry VIII is a good story, but also it's important to understand the act of supremacy, Church of England. But now we have this tie-in with Spain that is going to help lead to wars in the continent, and then of course a massive invasion attempt of England. So she was Catholic. She was raised Catholic, and she began to turn back the Church of England to go back to Catholicism. And she began to persecute leading Protestants within England. Eventually, How much she ordered, how much were ordered by other people is unclear, but she certainly wanted this. It's taking so long. Eventually, 287 Protestants would be burned at the stake. That's why she's going to be known as Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary, to reestablish Catholicism. But that's going to be really hard because the church, the crown had taken over all church property and she was not willing to give that back. And it was really complex. And she married Philip II of Spain, Charles V's son, the brand new monarch of Spain. And remember Spain, we got Spain and then all the New World, this incredibly rich country. There they are getting married. And so you have this, now we have the joint monarchies. We essentially have Philip and Mary, king and queen of both Spain and England. But really, who's in charge? Philip. I mean, marriages meant that once a woman is married, not only does her property go to the husband, she is now owned by the husband, and her identity is gone. I should add that was the law in the United States and some states to the 1980s. In fact, women in about 12 states could not even get a credit card because they needed their husband or get a bank account. And so that is women that's subservient and not equal would be the kind of the norm. Well, with that, but then she developed cancer. She didn't know it. Yeah.
She acted.
Oh, yeah. She was born 21 years old.
Yes, a 3-year-old queen.
Yeah. I mean, that was when she was reigning. Yeah, she was like born as queen. Good question. Yeah. And with that, she actually thought she was pregnant. She felt this rumbling in her stomach and she thought it was pregnancy. And she was overjoyed because remember, she thought she had an heir. Cancer. At least we're 99% sure it was cancer. One thing you'll find out, yes, there was a lot of cancer then. There's a lot more cancer, at least noticed today. I think you know what I meant, but because they just didn't do an autopsy, they didn't know. And now what? This is a catastrophe for, in a way, Philip, but for those who are Catholic, because the only person left who has literally been in hiding was Elizabeth. Elizabeth was raised a Protestant, and she tried her best to befriend Mary, but Mary hated her guts. They're half sisters. And Mary essentially didn't imprison her in the Tower of London, but she was staying in prison, essentially. Elizabeth. And so while she was there, she just was very subservient. And then as soon as she died, even though she was just a teenager, it doesn't mean that the teenagers can't do anything, but they didn't get the respect. Well, she's it. And she stepped up to the throne and she turned out to be the smartest of them all. And incredibly intelligent, also vain with a terrible temper, but a lot of people who are smart are vain, and people who aren't smart are vain and have a terrible temper. And she would reign for the next 45 years. Queen Elizabeth. So while that happened, okay, so Philip did this. Now Philip is going to try to figure out a way to marry her. But while that's going on, Philip has other issues. Where did the mouse go? When you hit that, it might shock you. But it actually breaks them. I broke it many instances. So I did have a little hand click thing, but I threw it.
How did you throw it?
I was just playing around and I was faking through it and I threw it in the hallway. We all got a good laugh. All right. So while this is going on, don't forget that Counter-Reformation is going on, where the Catholic Church is trying to fight back against Reformation. And the leader of this Counter-Reformation were the kings of Spain and the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This Counter-Reformation was going on. And so here's Philip marrying the Catholic queen, and now she died. Elizabeth comes in, who is Protestant. Well, you know, we can work with that, Philip's thinking. But he has other things going on. So remember, Charles V abdicated, went to a monastery. Here's how long Philip VI would reign. There's Charles. Can you see the family features of Philip? Yeah, it's the Habsburg chin. So, and they saw it as their goal to fight the heathens. Who are the heathens? The Protestants and the Muslims. They saw it as their goal. And let's see if we remember, what was the big empire that was right here in, go to this map. What was the empire? The Ottoman Empire. And so he, after Mary died, is focused on the Mediterranean. The Ottoman Empire was a growing and incredibly powerful kingdom. They just besieged Vienna. Oh, by the way, I've almost forgot to show you, that's Queen Elizabeth when she was the painted her as coronation. See her face, and you also face the white. So that was seen as a really big, important sign of beauty for women who got a white face. I mean, literally white and white. And so the makeup they would use is it would be a little bit of alum, which is kind of this conservative, a few other things they would make up, and lead. And they would mix it up, smear it on their face, and that would give them that white look. Yes, they're smearing lead on their face. Now, lead is shockingly bad to children, but it's still really bad to adults too. Don't eat lead. Yes. No, it wasn't race. Remember, race was literally, or people obviously know it's people give the public scheme. But race, as what's going to come, still is going to come with colonizations. The slavery is one. But good question. No, it was just purely the style was to be like overly pale. Oh, I should add why. Why overly pale? If you're working in the field in porn, you're tan because you're outside of it. With the idea being you're inside and you're especially, that's why. Same thing where being like heavier was a sign of was a sign of wealth, power, and therefore beauty. Just styles change on us. So she's in the middle of this. She's queen. Philip is talking to her, but Philip has other issues. We got to get to that really quick. So there's Spain. All that's New Spain. But the Mediterranean is where he's going to focus. And he's going to start a series of crusades while being married to Mary and then try to woo Elizabeth. Woo is a good word, isn't it? Woo. So they would set up what's called the Holy League of Christians. And they even allowed Protestants in there, as much as he hated them, to fight the Ottoman Empire. And where? Here. Now, this is how big the Ottoman Empire was by 1580. It's massive. Almost all this area. This one was desert, so they really didn't conquer that. That was more for Bedouins. All the way here. And this was a Muslim state here in Morocco. They just weren't taken over. But it wasn't like full control. These were like little, they called suzerains, and they just controlled these areas. They were like, almost like feudalism. But we're coming to, why are we going backwards? The Battle of Lepanto. That's the Greek name. And it's right here off Greece. And the Spanish fleet, but it was a combined fleet of other, mostly Christian power, unified together under the command of Admiral Don Juan. Yes, his name was Don Juan. And he had been out of favor because he was such a good admiral. He kind of Philip was jealous of him, but he needed Don Juan. He organized this massive fleet. Both sides had over 400 ships. Now, this was just at a time where they're starting to use sailing vessels, but they still had the galleys. Remember the galleys where they had rows of people rowing? And first semester, those who are here, we saw that the galleys, like that. They still had those and sailing vessels. Now, they couldn't move as fast as sailing vessels, but they could be bigger and more open. The rowers take a lot of space up. If you have open space, you can put cannon and you can make them fatter. So if the cannon fires, it won't topple the ship over. The problem with these smaller galleys, you put a cannon on them. If you put a cannon on the side, it fires and the ship topples. Bad for crew morale. So the only place you put a cannon is in the front. But the bigger, fatter ships, you can put them on the starboard and port side. So there's a little harbor right here, little inlet. And the Ottoman fleet basically allowed themselves to get bottled up in here. These fleets had to be near the shore because they're all rowing. They couldn't go very far. And Don Juan captured them. And the other thing is, he put the big sailing vessels up here ringed with cannon. And so those little ships could dart around, but these big, massive ships, galleons, just devastated the Ottoman fleet. And there's a picture, a very stylized picture of they hemmed them in, surrounded them, and destroyed the Ottoman fleet. Lepanto was one of the most decisive and important battles in history. Yeah.
If the Ottomans use cannons on their ships,
They had cannon in the front of their galleys, but the problem with that is you have to literally be aimed pointed at them. And where the galleons could turn on the side and just kind of drip back and forth and fire. And so with that, a decisive victory for the Holy League. This is a picture of the battle, and they show it as in they're being blessed by the saints. This is huge. The Ottoman Empire, therefore, will still control the Eastern Mediterranean. Let's go back to this. The battle's right here. It isolated the Ottomans for the most part here. And so this saved this area from Ottoman control. The Ottomans are sweeping in. They're going to try to take Malta, but they were raiding all along these coasts, taking slaves. And it looked like they might conquer there. This was a decisive victory. Philip was a big victor. That darn Elizabeth and the Netherlands. So while that's going on, let's get quickly to the Netherlands. It's going to be known as the 80-Year War. And you know it's a fun war when it's only 80 years. It's a constant revolt of the Dutch. The Dutch are another term for the Netherlands. And I put a Bruegel painting in here because I just love Bruegel so much.
that's the problem. Right?
Yeah. This painting, if you go to the Rijksmuseum, it's called, in Amsterdam, covers the whole wall. So you really see it. It's cool. And one of the best parts is it's oil paint. And so the oil paint, it kind of leaves layers. And so it looks a little 3D. This is flat. You don't really get it. It's just a problem with looking at it. You actually go to the museum, go to these art museums and see it. The Rijksmuseum is really cool. About 2 blocks away is the Van Gogh Museum, which I'll talk about him a little bit later on. And but that one, you literally have to wait in line. You get about 1 second to look at each painting. It's crazy how crowded that is. So they've been revolting against the Habsburg, basically Habsburg of Spain. Part of what's most of the Netherlands was controlled by Spain. Austria is another Habsburg ally. They would eventually take what's called Belgium. And in the Netherlands was the Dutch Reformed Church, and it was greatly influenced by Calvin. Calvin was influencing them. And Calvinism went, to Phil's point of view, heathens. So, one other thing, the port city of Antwerp. Antwerp is right here. Antwerp is still one of the 2 or 3 biggest ports in the world. And this was a Dutch port. The Dutch were known as a commercial power by the end of the century, even though they're still part of Spain. Dutch merchants went all over. That's part of the reason why in the next century, the Dutch are going to conquer one of the largest empires in the world. Here, the Dutch East Indies. They'll hold that till 1947. They'll also sell that. Oh, and the place called Manhattan. Yes, the British would take it from, or the British would take it now, then they would turn Manhattan, which the Dutch called New Amsterdam, into New York. But they becoming a sea power. Antwerp was this huge port. I should add Antwerp now. Anybody know what country Antwerp is in today? It's one of the largest ports in the world. Belgium. Yeah, part of Belgium. Huge port. It's, yeah, not that great of a city because it's a big port town. And I like this picture of Antwerp here by the Dutch. I just love the sea monsters. All right. So Margaret of Palma was the aunt of Philip. And actually, she married Philip's uncle. She was in charge. And she was given charge of this Dutch province. And the Calvinists petitioned her to say, let us practice our religion. We'll stay loyal, but we're Calvinists. And she basically called them beggars and thieves and hooligans and began an inquisition. And the inquisition was to root out the Calvinists and basically give them a very basic choice. Leave or convert and give everything you have to us, and we'll torture you to make sure you mean business. So leave or convert and we torture you so you're not lying. Catholicism. And that is going to help trigger the backwards thing. Oh, a Dutch attack on Catholic churches all over the Netherlands. And it's called iconoclasm. And what they did is they went inside the churches and they tore down everything. All the drapes, they broke the stained glass, all everything from the icons of the crucifixion to Mary and Joseph to the saints. They went through and destroyed it all, stripped the walls, and in many of the places stripped off the paint, literally stripped it off. So the churches became bare. If you go to the cathedrals in these areas that survived in the Netherlands, you see it in Britain too, there's nothing there. There's these blank open walls when the cathedrals were just beautifully decorated before. And no false Catholic idols. Calvinism, we don't believe in that. And that will trigger a revolt. And the Dutch revolt will go on for 80 years. They're going to revolt. Now, one thing that's going to happen when the Spanish start cracking down, a lot of these Calvinists are going to say, I got to get the heck out of there. Now, remember, you did a map. In England, here, Netherlands is right about here. A lot of them fled to England because England's Protestant, even though they're not Calvinists.
Did they allow the building?
Elizabeth was pragmatic. A lot of them were successful merchants. Tax revenues. This is going to trigger Calvinism in Britain and a horrific civil war. Good times are coming. Oh, and the Bank of England. So, very quickly through that. So, Parma turned out to be a disaster. And so, Philip sent the Duke of Alba, known as the Iron Duke, an effective general. He had troops there, and they also marched troops up from Habsburg, Italy. And in fact, he set up this board called the Council of Troubles, and they literally went through town by town and decided who was loyal to the crown, who was loyal to Calvin, and they used terror. Imprisoning, torturing Calvinists, saying, if you resist, continue the revolt, we're coming there next. And do you see his picture? Do you see it? He's holding a rod to beat, torture. In fact, that's what he wanted his painting to be. He was willing to use torture, beating, big, right? And then across every place else. But that's where they would just hammer. And so with that, we're not going to talk about Spanish Road. By 1570, the Dutch revolt was put down. And they're still fighting, but it was mostly put down. And they forced every single Calvinist, if you're going to stay, you have to pay 1/10 of your income in tax. Now, I put this up here because this is an example of iconoclasm. Look how they ripped off all the disciples. They tore off the heads. I just thought that was kind of cool. This is in a church in Amsterdam. But as kind of a soft to them to say, okay, you're put down. They would call this area the United Provinces. Did you notice that on your map? That's where we get the Netherlands. One more thing, and then I'll finish up Elizabeth and the Queen tomorrow. So, let's say tomorrow, Tuesday. So, let me finish the last thing and we'll finish it. And then I'll give you time. Okay, so William of Orange. He was also called William the Silent. And he kind of sucked up to the Spanish and said, basically when they asked him, are you Catholic? He responded with the silent. He supposed to would not talk. He was what we call a stadtholder. Basically, he administered, it's kind of like a duke or a prince, but not quite, because it was partial officer elected by the noblemen. He administered parts of the United Province. And in response to this crackdown, he again led a revolt. And I should add, in France at the same time, French Calvinists were slaughtered by French Catholics in 1572. And William of Orange decided, if they did that in France, we're next, unless we fight now. They brutally slaughtered thousands of French Calvinists. They're called Huguenots. There's William of Orange. A couple more things really quick. The last thing we just get to when he fought. So the siege of Leyden. So I said that last thing, let's get to this attack. The siege of Leyden. So for example, the Spanish came up and they attacked Leyden, but Leyden was on the sea. And because of the superior Dutch commerce fleet, they could bring supplies in and out. And Leyden was here. It was surrounded by dikes. So that's, you know what a dike is. So here's, you got, it's area, half of it was under sea level. And so what they would do is, a dike is a dam on the land. And they would dike up areas so seawater could not come in with the high tide and flood the areas out. So they put a dam, convert kind of marshy land to land, and then make another dike, convert that. So a dike is a dam. And Netherlands is twice as big land today than it was in 1500. Because of all these dike building. So
Are they still doing it now?
yes, because of climate change. And the sea level is rising. They are making this a very elaborate series of dikes outside of Amsterdam, Rotterdam, all over the cities. And actually, some of their experts have went to Miami, but Miami won't spend any money. Miami is going to be gone in probably 15 years. It's being undermined by sea level because it's going to be about 3 inches high. Have you said anything about that? They just had a tower, the apartment fell. That's because the seawater is coming in. It's a really big, the Dutch are really quite efficient at it. Yeah, I'm worried about Miami. It's going to be a totally different city, or they're going to have to build massive dikes, but even then it's underwater. Back to this. The Dutch undermined their dikes, meaning they went through, cut underneath, collapsed their dikes, seawater came in and drowned the Spanish besieging.
With Spanish were sieging on top of the dike.
Yeah, they were on the land that was saved by the dikes. The Dutch undermined the dikes, boom. Destroyed the army. This is a basically celebration after it happened. And so, and that, let's go. All right, I'll give you the rest of the period to read. Now, why are you laughing?
No, I'm not swearing, I've been doing it.
Okay, so let's go and get to work now. Give you a chance to read. So as I graded the test, I noticed something. The people who missed a lot of days, you weren't making that stuff up. If you miss days and don't make it up, I mean, it's on the test. I could tell when you were there. I could always tell. Yeah. Oh. So you have the map of the reading, but we will have a quiz Tuesday morning. Between the beginning of the period.
at 5 a.m.
I'll be here. No, I will not be here. Okay, so map arena. Now, I do have the quiz ready. So my assumption is if you're not reading, you're in the map, you're ready for the quiz now. I haven't had a chance to record the